Chapter 6, Lecture, Age and Work, The Graying of the Workforce.
Last time, we discussed one of the ways that the world of work has been changing, the growth of the distributed workforce. Today, we're going to talk about a change in the world of work that has been brought about by changes in the makeup of the population of the workforce. What I'm talking about is the aging, or as some refer to it, the graying of the workforce. First, some population statistics and predictions. According to the World Health Organization, the number of people today who are age 60 and over has doubled since 1980. It is projected that within the next 5 years, for the first time in history, the number of adults age 65 and over will outnumber children under the age of 5. By 2050, these older adults will outnumber all children under the age of 14. And the human lifespan is also increasing. The National Institute on Aging reports that most countries, including developing countries, show a steady increase in longevity. So, what does all of this have to do with work? The answer to that is the subject of today's lecture. First, I will explain some historical factors that have contributed to the rapid aging of the human population. I will then move on to the main point of the lecture, that is, the impact that this aging population is having on the world of work. Now, how did we get to be so old? 2 basic trends have resulted in the rapid increase in the age of the world's population: a falling birth rate in countries with advanced economies, and improvements in medical care that have contributed to an increased lifespan. Medical advances are easy enough to understand, but the reasons for the declining birth rate require a bit of explanation. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, much of the population grew their own food on small farms. Therefore, large families were an advantage. The need for cheap labor to work the land, coupled with high infant mortality, made large families advantageous. During industrialization, there was a population shift from rural to urban areas where factories were located. As a result of this shift, the need for large families began to decline. This, combined with advances in reproductive technology that allowed couples to take a more active role in planning their families, led to a gradual decline in the birth rate. By the start of World War II, in parts of Europe and the United States, the birth rate had fallen close to replacement levels. That is, the level at which the number of babies being born is roughly equivalent to the number of people dying. This trend, however, was interrupted by what has come to be known as the baby boom, the period of time following World War II, 1946 to 1964, when birth rates increased sharply. This sudden and unexpected rise in the birth rate was only temporary, however. By the mid-1960s, it had fallen to pre-World War II levels. And it has continued to fall ever since. Globally, since the early 1970s, the population growth rate has fallen by more than 40%. And in many developed nations, the birth rate has now fallen to below replacement levels. The fertility rate in many European countries is now less than 1.5 children per woman, which is far below the replacement rate of 2.1. In Japan, the rate is just 1.4. And the lowest fertility rate is South Korea's at 1.2 children per woman. And despite its large population, China's fertility rate is just 1.5, a result of government policies to limit families to just one child. If this global trend toward fewer children continues, it will have an enormous impact on society's ability to support its growing number of elderly citizens. And that brings us back to our topic today, the impact of an aging population on the world of work. To understand the profound impact of rising life expectancy and falling birth rate, you need to understand the elderly support ratio. The elderly support ratio is calculated by dividing the number of working-age people, ages 15 to 64, by the number of people 65 or older. This ratio gives a rough idea of how many support providers are available for each elderly person who might be dependent on the work of others. To give you an indication of the enormous change that's taking place, according to the Population Research Bureau, in 1950, there were 12 working-age people for every elderly person in the world. By 2010, this ratio had declined to 9. The ratio actually varies significantly from country to country, with the lowest ratios being in the advanced economies of the developed world. To put this into perspective, in Europe today, there are fewer than 5 working-age people to support each elderly person. In Japan, Italy, and Germany, the ratio is even lower, only 3. By 2050, projections indicate that the ratio for the world will decline from 9 working adults per elderly person to 4, with Japan having the lowest ratio of just 1 to 1. The potential impact on the world of work is profound. One result is the number of older workers who are now remaining in their jobs past retirement age. A second impact is caused by just the opposite phenomenon: the large number of baby boomers who are and will be retiring at the same time, taking with them knowledge and expertise that will be difficult to replace over the short term. Okay, let's address each of these in turn. First of all, the fact that a large number of baby boomers at or nearing retirement age are remaining in their jobs means that young workers entering the workforce are finding it difficult to find work, particularly in desirable white-collar professional jobs. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median age of the American worker has risen dramatically in recent years, from 35 in 1980 to 42 in 2010. And at the executive level, the median age is quite a bit higher, at about 52. Globally, 14% of the workforce is now over the age of 55. But according to the McKinsey Global Institute, that figure will rise to 22% by 2030. In the past, older workers retired or died, so at any one time there might have been 2 generations in the workforce at the same time. Now, the workplace has become increasingly multi-generational, with young, middle-aged, and older workers. When younger people do find work, they will often encounter co-workers who are 2 to 3 generations older than they are. This generation gap is made even wider by the so-called digital divide, that is, the quite different levels of comfort with technology between digital natives, young people who have never known anything but a wireless connected world, and aging baby boomers who grew up without personal computers, much less social networking. In today's working world, management is increasingly having to deal with the inevitable clashes that can occur when workers with such widely different life experiences and attitudes toward work interact. Now, the other trend affecting the world of work is directly related to the fact that all these baby boomers are nearing retirement age at the same time. While some are remaining on the job, as we've just discussed, many are leaving the workforce and retiring, taking with them the experience and knowledge gained over long careers, often spent working for the same company. This expertise is not easily replaced in younger workers who have little to no experience or change jobs frequently and lack the institutional knowledge of the baby boomers. The loss of highly skilled employees, those whose jobs involve interaction between 2 people and which require problem-solving skills and experience, such as engineers, nurses, and lawyers, is in turn affecting the productivity of many companies. In fact, some companies have had to scale back expansion due to a lack of the highly skilled workers such expansion depends on. And If population growth in advanced economies such as Japan and much of Europe remains low, this problem will persist far beyond the retirement of the baby boomers. There will simply not be enough young workers to replace retirees. Although in the short term, it might seem that older workers are standing in the way of younger workers seeking employment, over the long term, the labor of older workers will be essential to economic growth. In addition, as the human lifespan increases, people will need to work longer to make enough money to support themselves in an old age that could last quite a bit longer than it did in previous generations. And with a longer working life and rapid changes brought about by technology, the idea of having just one career is likely to be a thing of the past. Instead, most people will be having second and even third careers, with their final career just getting started when they are in their 60s. At this point, it's unclear how employers and workers themselves will adapt to the need and often desire of older people to remain in the workforce. At the moment, workplaces aren't designed to meet the needs of their aging workers very well. In fact, cases of age-related discrimination in work are on the rise. Companies often lay off their older, more expensive employees first. And in our youth-oriented culture, companies that are hiring often prefer younger candidates, even with far less experience. Clearly, as the population continues to age and remain healthy for a longer period of time, such a youth orientation in the workplace will need to be rethought. Okay, so that's it for today. Don't forget that next week will be our review session for the final exam. So, come prepared with your questions.